Oh. So awakening is the end of identification with the mind and with the body. So that thought is seen to arise spontaneously, and the body is seen as not belonging to anyone. There is no one to whom it could belong. So there's only life happening. And everything is empty, so there are no things. There's no chairs, no people, no glasses, no non-duality talk. But just all these things arising in nothing, and that can be seen, and it's also known, which is very hard to describe how that comes about. None of this is terribly interesting. In a way it is, in a subtle way it is, because life thereafter is experienced differently, in an experiential way. So life continues as before, only it's felt like there's nothing here, there's no location. There's no location for being. So it's almost like pure spirit, if you like. It's just, there's a lightness to being, and everything is just seen. There's no boundary line between the me, the person, or the character, and everything that's arising. And usually this awakening takes place in two events where it can happen over time, seemingly over time, where it can creep up on you quite slowly without you kind of realizing it, until it becomes clear that something has shifted. And for a lot of people there's perpetual kind of glimpses back to restriction, constriction, and then glimpses again, and that can go on for a long time. So when emptiness is seen, desire tends to dissolve. Not all desire, but a lot of motivation goes, a lot of direction in life kind of goes away. Desire for intrigue, maybe. I mean, there's no sort of, anything can happen. So, I mean, desires could still occur, but generally it takes, there's a kind of just almost like a sense of equilibrium comes, so the highs and lows tend to flatten out a little bit, and it can be like a desert period. So there's kind of going through the motions of life without really feeling attached. So drama loses its kind of interest, and so you may not know what's happened if you've seen that, but it might come as a shock, it might not, it might just be a simple noticing that something's different. So that's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, it's different. It might be pleasant if you're really, really in suffering and really addicted to, I don't know, just doing, if you're really addicted to doing. The seeing of unconditional love is different. It's a celebration in a sense, a very quiet celebration. It's joyous, it's all, everything you ever wanted is happening, is just here. It's just here, it's there, it's like where you are is the perfect place. I'm not saying if you're in a really extreme situation that would be the case, but really you just, all that restriction in the mind, all the absorption in that just falls away, so that everywhere is suddenly your focus is everywhere. So, and that focus is more of an absorption. It's like it's like a falling in love with. So when you look at something, you're almost sort of sucked into it. It's almost like adhesive. So nature is particularly beautiful. So it's beautiful everywhere actually. But there's something about the heaven and earth. It's so clearly seen. That experience of heaven and earth is really seen outside more than anywhere, I think. Although even if you look at a glass or something, you see the perfection in it. You look at a table, stillness permeates everything, and that sacred dimension is in everything. So there's seeing things for the first time, and it looks, depending on how this affects you, because there can be different, you might say, depths, whatever, of awakening, that could be transformed, so that you might find yourself walking down the street and just suddenly stopping and staring at the sky and just going, what the hell is that? It seems to have a different dimension. It's more beautiful than you could. It's not the same sky, basically. It's not the same tree. It's not the same flower. There's this quality that was never there before. It's absolutely stunning. And the mind as well can just blow in that. So it can be a complete cessation of mind, or it may just be that the mind is slowed down. But even if the mind is still there, it's not interfering with what is. So you might as well, when it's happened, sometimes it can trigger memories of past events, or you might remember when you were a child and this was already the case. You might have some memory just before you became identified as little whoever, and thought began to be the identity, who you are. You saw yourself as the one who thinks. And so you can spend an hell of a lot of time just wanting to sit around doing absolutely nothing, if that's a possibility, because and it feels very, very healing. There can also be a huge release of energy as well if the mind has been so conflicted or in turmoil for a long time. There can be so much energy that maybe sleep is impossible, which can be a nightmare as well for some people. A blissful nightmare, maybe, because it can be blissful. This period in particular. So it can be a good idea as well afterwards to start to talk about this experience or own this experience in some way, because very often we're unsure until we start to embody this as well, so we start to be able to express it in some way, or find some way of talking about it, or because the mind can still doubt as well afterwards. So some people get doubts, particularly if they have been made themselves very small in life. If they've been a kind of people pleaser or something, they might find it quite difficult to own this, or they might just listen to lots of different speakers and think it's not like that, it's not like that. So, but life will never be the same again if it's abiding. No matter what suffering can come, and it doesn't hook for the same duration. It will come and it will fall away. So there tends to be, well, it's falling away from the mind-based reality, which is time. So the thoughts is always the future or the past. If you look, you can see that for yourself. It's quite obvious. It can never really capture where you are. So that is really, so you can drift on for quite a long time with no problems whatsoever. So depending on, you could be living and continuing your life in the same way and not changing it at all. And at some stage you might want to change it. You might think, you don't want to change it, because there's something about being so internally changed that you might want to change your life, and that can be difficult for some people because whatever issues you had before could be there afterwards, but usually not regarding the heart. If you're kind of fairly normal, regular, then the heart will just be open and there'll be this vulnerability there. So the defences around intimacy will probably go, and there's that in loveness. It's there with everything, everyone, but there is a joy in seeing other human beings, because it's like you're relating from that, and so you're seeing beyond the personality as well. You're seeing that no matter what's there, there's just a knowing, a deep knowing. So very often there's a real warm response to seeing the other, because unconditional love is radical acceptance of everything, including resistance to whatever is happening. That is also included. So all objects, all feelings. So there's a kind of not arguing so much with reality, not arguing so much like shoulds and oughts and this is how it should be. And you can still be very repressed after this. You may not be able to discriminate amongst people very well. You may be, if you're a psychopath, for instance, you'll probably still be a psychopath. So not everything is shifted, not everyone is shifted in the same way, but most people, they are to a greater or lesser extent. So but it's also very ordinary. It becomes more ordinary, so it becomes your new reality. And it doesn't mean that your personal history may not be accessed as much, but it can be really enjoyed, and that's part of it that I really like as well, because without being intimate with that and knowing that, I wouldn't be able to make so much sense of psychology, which is a big part of what I'm into. So there is often a reluctance to look at that, but you won't, if you don't want to, then don't. But once you do, you know, it can be good if you're stuck as well to look at time which arises in this. And there can also be a lot of energetic experiences which happen around this time or before or after, which can be quite mind-blowing as well and quite exciting or awful. In some cases awful. If there's a lot of trauma there, it seems to be that sometimes it can be quite painful. But that can be exciting as well, because if you're into kind of metaphysics and you're interested in the nature of reality, this does make you question, you know, what this is more as well. It's interesting. So I don't know how long I've talked for. Not very long. 2 minutes. Any questions?
What was your kind of first knowing what you're talking about? What was that like?
Well, into the sort of abiding state, or the glimpse?
Yeah, I mean the first time you recognised that there was a truth about yourself that you hadn't really realised before.
So the seeing of unconditional love, maybe. What's it like? Well, when it actually happened, I mean, I'd had energetic experiences the whole kind of day, which I'd never had before, so everything was intensified, and it was just everything, bliss was so thick I could hardly walk. I was just so mesmerised by everything. Speech. I was in a restaurant when the Big Bang moment, although it was all kind of a Big Bang. And I was in a restaurant with my partner, my then partner, and I couldn't really understand language. I had no thought, and well, I hadn't had any all day, and I didn't really understand what I was doing with the glass of wine in my hand. I didn't really understand how to drink or eat. I didn't understand how to chew. It was just seeing love and everything. It was initially, there was a moment of fear or a kind of, and I'm putting this into words, it's kind of bullshit in a way, but like, fuck, you know, like a loss, and like I didn't want that, and then suddenly, it was almost like a gap in the bliss, and then suddenly, right in the bliss, right in the energy, and right in the love, and everything being that, and a man sitting opposite talking just the small things, but they, you know, like normal conversation is seeming really funny because it's irrelevant. It's like, you know, there's this. But the interesting thing was, it wasn't shocking. It was just stepping into another life, as if that had only ever been that life. I remember looking at a tree out the window. I was sat by the window, and I just thought, it's the Garden of Eden. I can never, you know, it was very hard to turn my head from anything I looked at, because it was just holy, and it was beautiful, and it was, yeah. And I couldn't convey that, and I couldn't talk about it, which I didn't want to at that point. I just thought it was quite funny, and just watching this little mouth moving and all that. But yeah, the next couple of, I don't know, 2-3 years were pretty intense of that, and I didn't really want to do anything. I didn't have to, just sitting around, absorbed when I could, even though it was just looking at the wall or looking at the wardrobe, was beautiful, everything was beautiful, so yeah. But there was no recognition that I'd had the experience of emptiness. I remembered that later, because I didn't understand that, because I wasn't really reflecting. You may not reflect for a long time, so there was no kind of really thinking about what had happened or talking about it, and then there was doubts around all that sort of stuff. And, have you experienced it, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can pretty much relate to everything you say.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. This was a long time ago. This is when I was 19.
Whoa, okay.
So that's 12 years ago.
And you've never talked about it, or?
I've never talked about it in here. It happened in Canada, and there was a friend of mine who understood from an experiential point of view.
Okay.
So I could talk to him about it, but since I've got back, I haven't spoken to him about it. I tried to speak to my family about it, but they couldn't understand. But it's actually really refreshing to hear you talk about it, because it's the first time I've had anyone kind of describe anything similar to my experience.
Okay, so you identify similar kind of...
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you mean, basically.
Yeah, not so many go into the experiential aspect of it, and I suppose that's the beauty of it for me, is in that, like, and I don't know, and how it changed you, and I guess the love aspect, because actually emptiness isn't particularly exciting, is it? Like, you know, well, sometimes if you bring your attention to emptiness, and you know, it's interesting the fact that you feel that there's that weightlessness, or that, you know, if you fall off a cliff, it doesn't really matter. That's kind of there's something quite sweet about that. But there's other times when falling off a cliff where it feels so good. I don't know. But,
so how did you sort of reconcile that experience? You know, how did you? Because, you know, at the time it seems that you were sort of, you know, a bit out. I'm sure you weren't out of it, but you were sort of having this experience. So, and then, but how did you manage to sort of understand what was going on?
I didn't. I mean, I'd heard.
How have you come
to
how have you understood it subsequently?
So I knew. I mean, I knew something radical happened, and I'd already read non-duality. I hadn't come across non-duality for very long. I really kept a lot of it to myself, because I felt slightly ashamed about talking about it. Like, who am I to talk about this? Or I'm waiting for someone to shoot me down. Or so there was a lot of keeping it in, like I got, which I come across in one-to-ones with people as well. So, I mean, I did listen to people. I don't know. I think it's at the point where, I mean, I wasn't ready to talk about this until I met Satan, like in my my vision experience, where where a lot of repressed material was just seen. It was just really, really clear. And so the waking up with the psychology was fucking amazing for me, because I didn't give a shit anymore. Like, I was freed up to speak. I could see through why I wasn't speaking. I could see through why I was, all that shame and stuff. Suddenly it was like, I can move forward. And I realised also I hadn't been able to access anger. So that's why I was stuck as well. So that's why I say what I say in a talk. Like, the psychology is important too, because without anger you can carry, and other emotions as well, you can carry on your life just as before and think that's okay, and then you're stuck in shit situations and you don't do anything about that, because actually, in my case, I just didn't have the resources. I didn't have the strength to change. So you have to, you can build those, but some people, just by looking, or if you're in psychotherapy, or you've got a good friend, or I don't know, Kundalini can bring, those energetic experiences can bring a lot up from the depths, sometimes unpleasantly. If there's like a history of sexual abuse or something like that, it can be a bit of a shock, but you know, yeah, some people it doesn't seem to be a problem. They just, you know, I just see it, and some people just flow and they just leave. They don't seem to be stuck in their situation at all. They're smooth, but maybe they have better resources. I don't know. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that sort of see, you know, having a spiritual experience like that as more of a, you know, there's a downside to it, because you have that experience and it's, you know, so amazing, and then you want it back, and then you sort of choke. You know, people can keep. I mean, there's lots of people, you know, who are stuck in meditation, who are sort of constantly trying to sort of cycle those sort of experiences and stuff like that. So did you try to get the experience back?
There wasn't an experience, like it was ongoing. It didn't stop, and it's, you know, it's not an experience anyway. I mean, it's beyond experience. It's what is already the case. But yeah. I had a glimpse 20 years earlier, which I didn't recognise. So I know, although I didn't know that's what it was, so I can understand why people want to go back to like a glimpse being an experience, or being a period of time maybe. But this was ongoing, so it wasn't like there wasn't anything lost. You know, there was nothing lost. There was nothing to regain. You know,
Yeah.
it was just
Right.
kind
A
of
change in your perception of.
yeah, and the falling, just the yeah, the falling away was just, it was just over. It, even if suffering's there, I mean, if suffering is really intense, the sense of being embodied and being, you know, a person is just not there. It doesn't come back. It's just suffering arising. It's for no one, basically. And even that, you know, unconditional love, I mean, even that has a feeling sense to it, but that goes up and down too. Like, there's no, I don't know, I've never had the experience of it coming and going, and that experience has never been with me. But yeah, people can waste a hell of a lot. Really get stuck in trying to regain an experience, which is quite, it's quite sad in a way, because I know it's very comforting, the message and stuff, like there's something else there, and I know that there's something else. That's how it helped me when I had the first glimpse, even though I didn't know what it was, there's something else going on here, and that was like, I think enough to kind of keep me, well, I don't know, it didn't keep me, I was in a really bad place, but it still made life not maybe slightly more bearable, because you know, suffering tends to often precedes this. Doesn't always. But meditation, yeah, I suppose some people have, I don't know, what experiences, maybe the mind stops in meditation, I don't know, whatever bliss or whatever, or maybe the self seems to drop away for a short while, or yeah, it's very hard to argue with that as well, because you know the advice is always not to seek that again. You know, it does you no good, but you're always going to seek it. You're just always. It's almost like, well, you know, don't cling on to a bliss experience, but you know, you can't anyway. It's going to go. They're going to come and go. Bliss comes and goes. Not everyone gets bliss, and or ecstasy, or samadhi states. All these other stuff come and go.
When you talk about this bliss or ecstasy kind of state, the thoughts are there, or you're just not paying attention to them, therefore they're not there? Or, because you know, I read a lot, I listened to a lot of them, a lot of the states described as the thoughts not being there, you're just free of thoughts. I mean, I don't know, I'm not there, I'm confused, and which is probably a good thing to get more confused and not attached to anything. But do you find the thoughts are there, you just become a watcher now?
No, well, in bliss state, I mean, bliss states come and go, but in those states, I mean, for me, thought comes and goes, so I'll get periods where there's thought there, and I'll get periods when there's not. But when it's not, and in bliss state, there's rarely ever any thought in that, because it's so full, it's kind of very drunken, it feels very, it is a kind of drunkenness. So yeah, no, we're totally empty, so it's nicer when that is the case. It's subtly nicer because it's just what it is, but it's not a watcher of the thoughts, there's no watcher. There's no location, there's just life, you know. It's much more simple than that. It's just there's no one in here and no one out there. It's just I don't know, love. There's just what is, and but yeah, it's hard to imagine. And I think a lot of people who wake up, not everybody gets no thought as well. It doesn't make you special or anything, but some people do and some people don't. And it's probably hard to conceive of that, because a lot of people doubt that that's possible, probably because they haven't experienced that. But we all get moments, but maybe they're not blissy enough. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. Yeah, I can understand, but from the non-duality side of things, how do you see the body and the what's in there, as the more people would call it creation or energy or whatever? Are they together experiencing this world? Because the way I see it is, we have this kind of smart exoskeleton inside. We are everything. That's everything. Chair, the tree, the whole lot. We are everything, just in there. And when you leave this and move on to something different. You become something else. But you're just part of the same thing. And the mind is really not an individual mind, it's mind as everyone connected together. So if I want to be different from the rest of it, it becomes quite difficult. So what I'm trying to drive at is, if I'm becoming awake or something, the way I'm imagining is without the rest of the society is not, as a mind, not on that direction, then it's going to become quite difficult for me to pull away from it. I don't know whether I'm articulating it correctly or not, but what I'm saying is trying to live in a society which is a mind in itself. The way that we are functioning now is a whole mind. And there's the two ends. I see the love and the power. If we are more towards the oneness as a whole society, then it becomes easier to be part of it. But if the society is shifted a lot more to the power end of the things, and you are trying to shift on your own to the other end, the life is quite difficult.
Power and oneness can exist together. They do exist together. You can wake up and power will be your modus operandi, not love. That's where people get confused and they think that this is all about love. It's not always. So it depends on what was there before and what, So certain traumas, if they're really deep, they're not really that shiftable. So you'll get someone who's awake and they will continue they will use that to their benefit, perhaps, maybe. More insight, more awareness, more possibility for exploitation. Luckily, percentage of the population that's like that is very low, but they will gravitate towards having a platform, particularly a spiritual one. I could be a psychopath one, and you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know because we're duped by appearances. We really are. If I sit here and I'm beatific, you'll think I'm beatific all the time. We just do. But it's just, when you're saying about the inside, it's the end of there being anyone in here, which doesn't make the personal life be any less. If anything, it's more beautiful. That's what I find now. It doesn't rule out any of the other possibilities either of what this is or what goes on after biological life. It really doesn't. So, but yes, it'd be very nice if it was all going back to, if it was power versus love and waking up meant love. We've got the human condition, it doesn't change, and we're not perfect, nobody is. And the people who are more shadow integrated, I trust more. So if anyone is feeling holy, there's bound to be a lot more repression there anyway. So the holy ones are the ones that, as Jung said, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow, or something like that. Is that?
Yeah. Other weird thing I thought, Sally, do you ever wonder about the dogs, cats and animals? What is it to them about this, oneness, or because they're life form as well, and as what we see or imagine.
But there's no thought there, so I mean, when you were a little child, before you knew how to speak, you were just living in oneness. It's very similar, so life is just immediate. You weren't reflecting on that, so you couldn't say you were self-realised, because you've got to have a self to realise, there's a beyond to the mind. You can't recognise, as we can start talking about all this stuff just because we have been identified, or even in some cases have been awake and then realising you're awake, one case I can think of. So, I mean, cats and dogs dogs are known to be in the now, aren't they? They never get bored. You can tell the dog is not bored, but, you assume, because it's just meeting you for the first time with, unconditional love, so.
And I mean, animals are just programs, really. They're just, dogs. No, but they are essentially. I mean, a dog sort of acts out what a dog should do, and a cat acts out how a cat should. But and they just being, dogs being a dog, and a cat's being a cat, and a fish is being a fish. But they don't have the ability. They're not self-reflective, so they're not able to sort of question their own reality and say, what am I doing here? It's only human beings that have that,
Yeah.
So, a dog might have a moment, it might sit on a hill, and something might jar inside it maybe, or it has emotions, it feels love, but it doesn't. It just maybe feels those emotions in a raw way, but I don't think they are able to interpret them intellectually. They're just able to experience those different emotions. And when they see food, they love food and they love being petted, and that's how you train them, really, isn't it? Because it's learned behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, presumably they don't know what they are, but to recognise themselves in the. I think some of them can recognise themselves, actually, but. Yeah.
Can I just say something to your point on your question on reconciliation, and to yours on like the feeling of euphoria or bliss, and that is that I've kind of often thought about my relationship with this sort of thing as a relationship in the same sense that you have it with a person. And in the same way, we can all kind of relate to how it feels to be in that honeymoon period with that person, and everything feels illuminated, and then after that honeymoon period disappears, there's still something profound that you have with that person, and you reconcile it as you go along. So it's kind of the same in that way. And in the same way, to your question about the bliss state, you can imagine being in that state of bliss with another person, except in this case it's with kind of all things, and there doesn't need to be like a thought there really about what's happening. You're just with that person in that place, and that's it really. And there can be thoughts that come and go, but like what you have for dinner, or what you think your relationship's going to be like in the future, but at that time, you're just in love with that. And in my case, that experience lasted over a year, I'd say, where I was just perpetually in that place.
That's a good way of putting it. And there is something like lovers, the way they, some lovers are lost in the gaze, and there's that, always no thought in that merging, it's a bit like that as well, it's just merging with kind of whatever you're looking at. There's just, particularly in those blissy states. I think also talking about this sometimes can bring bliss on. I'm getting Kundalini up my back.
Yeah. I think the other reason it's a good analogy is because when you have a relationship with another person, it's like when you go to that place of intimacy, the two of you fall away and then you're just there with them, you know. So it's kind of what you see in your time with them is the end of separation. You know, you want to come together with them. And in the same way, you know, it's the end of separation, but not with a person. You can relate to it in that way where maybe you've come really close with someone and you feel completely accepted, and like it doesn't matter who you are or what you're good at or how you look or anything. And it's coming to that, in my experience, that place, but with not the person, with, you know, with everything else. Yeah.
Can I ask you, with regards to your own, how you were able to reconcile it, am I right in saying that you've gone a decade without really having any kind of conversation about it? It's just totally your experience, and I mean, because I guess, imagine I have an incredible relationship with a woman, with a particular person.
Yeah.
How am I going to be able to tell you really what my experience was like, right? So in doing so, in me trying to do that, something gets lost just by dissecting and labelling and flattening, even through words. So you've just sat with the resonance of this thing as a totally personal experience.
Well, I mean, I've obviously discussed it with people close to me. You know, when I first saw my family again after, or my girlfriend, you know, obviously I shared with them, you know, as best I could at that time, but it's very difficult to even begin to know where to start because they have no point of reference for what you're talking about. And often the framework that they would view these kind of conversations would be through like what they may have learned in Sunday school or just really kind of elementary ideas about philosophy or something like that. And so to kind of try and lead them into an experience like that and have them relate to it is extremely difficult. And often, you know, they just can come with you so far, and then they can come with you intellectually up to a point, but it's kind of like me describing the taste of chocolate to you. You know, I could do it for an hour, and then when you taste it, it's just completely different, right? So for me, you know, I had those conversations, but they only ever went so far. So, you know, it has been predominantly an internalised experience for me. But, you know, that's one of the reasons I wanted to come today, was because, you know, I've never had any opportunity to talk about it or really sat with someone who understands what I'm talking about. Yeah. I
mean, initially when you spoke and said, you know, you had this occur and you haven't really been able to communicate particularly well, I sat here and I thought, wow, you know, how terrible that must have been. But actually, 15 minutes later, I sit and I think, wow, maybe what an advantage that is, because, you know, because it's not had anybody else's ideas or stuff to even maybe change it. You know, it's just sat as your own.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, I did kind of make a lot of effort, I'd say, with the few years after, to read and, you know, watch things and try and understand or just explain to myself what happened. In the same way that you try and, you know, rationalise any sort of strange experience that you have, maybe, or trauma or something like that.
I think the desire to communicate this with family and friends does fall away quite quickly.
Eventually, yeah, because it's human nature to want to, you know, something you perceive to be great happens to you, and you think, oh, you know, I could tell my mum about this, and she might have a similar feeling, and that might be really great for her. So it's just a natural thing to want to try and share it, but then, you know, fairly quickly, you know, you realise that it's quite a difficult thing to do, and then you just don't feel like you need to, because, you know, it's fine for them to be however they are, and if they come to it, that's great. If they don't, that's the same, basically.
Yeah.
you know, from my point of view. The desire here to communicate about this with friends or anyone is completely gone now. There isn't. I wouldn't even bring it up. It's just irrelevant to me. It's just not.
Now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's just not. Why would I? And why would I want to explain that? Because I know how the mind works anyway. And why would I? You know, there's no conversion. You know, desire to convert anyway. Is you know, it's just totally. But initially, I think there is that drive initially because you're so overflowing, aren't you? Oh, you know, I was on the phone to my, you know, it didn't occur to me that it even was going over their heads. I thought, I'm the one who's the idiot who didn't get this, but therefore everybody else, it must be really simple and straightforward, but actually it's paradoxical. It doesn't make any sense, obviously, because it's not my stuff. But yeah, I've a couple of friends, and you know, some friends just absolutely zero interest, but you're awake yourself, so.
My experience was that, I mean, as you said, it gets to a point where, you know, clearly, conversation has reached this. But I was really quite surprised by the opposite, that, as you said, you know, about point of reference, you know, probably 3 months after this happened, I was out in Asia, and 3 months after it happened, I thought, do you know what, I'm going to go back to London, fuck it. And, you know, it just seemed like the craziest place I could go was actually back to London. And I really thought that everyone was going to think that I'd lost it. I really thought that, you know, if I spoke about everything, which I couldn't help but do, you know, it's so, the cup was so overflowing that I couldn't not tell virtually everybody. And I came home, and you know, my friends and family, people that I've known all my life, what I was really surprised about was everyone had some kind of point of reference for this. You know, not one person went, I don't know what you're fucking talking about. And since, I must admit, you know what I mean, ever since then, everyone's, it's why everybody's here, right? Whether it's here in the forefront of your awareness, but it resonates for sure.
Yeah, I think that you know, over time, I mean, you know, me trying to explain it to someone now is very different from me trying to explain it 6 months, like after I kind of, you know, had that shift, because I didn't, you know, I hadn't had any time to reconcile it in my own experience or in my own mind, or had the concepts, or you know, had any real words to describe it properly. And so I can just, you know, I just felt like I didn't have any tools really to communicate it to my friends. When I tried, it just felt like it wasn't anywhere like near to, I don't know, and it was really frustrating. So I just kind of stopped, I guess.
It can be devastating for relationships as well. And friendships. And also, because I guess a lot of that connectivity is drama, and unconditional love can be a real pain in the arse for someone who's not in that state. And I can see that now. I don't think I was so understanding of that at the time, but looking back on it, who'd want to be around someone who's smiling, 100%. Open, is really boring. And they're not very talkative, and they're not very interested in the normal stuff. So yeah, I think I get what I must have been like.
Yeah, my brother, like, you know, basically just, he felt like I just lost my sense of humour. That was his reaction. He was like, you're just, you know, like, where's like the old you? And I was like,
oh, they weren't the best.
And it's hard to know what to do in that situation. it's someone like your brother, with it, you have a close relationship, and you feel like you're being, you know, losing that in some way, and it's really hard, but then, you know, it just takes time.
Yeah, or later on maybe you try to make an effort to, and you it feels so phony when you're acting that out or trying to.
Yeah, because you're trying to go back to a person that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
You're trying to recapture sort of something.
Yeah.
You can't go back in time like that. So yeah, you just got to accept that that's your new reality, and
Yeah.
I guess.
I don't know what the statistics are for, like, I mean, divorce rates and stuff for like MDs are like 77 to 80% in the first 5 years, but I imagine it's quite similar with these awakenings as well, because there's just you're different. You've got nothing. Well, then some people, of course, it can go the other way as well, but. And there is something you were saying as well about talking about it, like something about conversation itself. It's like more restful not to. So there's almost, I'm certainly in my case, I like being silent and being on my own is just easier and much more absorbing. So just, you know, okay, I could go out, but maybe it would be just a bit more relaxing just to sit here, like. So. It's funny because it's all perfect and it's all absorbing, but there are preferences to where that's the experience and how that's experienced. I think for me that what's left is, or the most exciting thing is just really letting go of that idea of authority of the other, because I don't think that goes. Even though you're awake and you know that any speaker is awake, you know, there's no difference there, but I think there's still those remnants of projection that can go on, you know, maybe they're a little bit more awake, I don't know, maybe they're awake longer, or I don't know, like subtly, you can still be, so it's almost like you're hearing people talking, from authorities talking for the first time and really hearing what they're saying without this gloss of significance and meaning, and it's like, oh right, oh god, like it's really strange, but then you know you can see the projection, but of course, I mean, obviously that's not a done deal either, because you know the power of appearances still gets us sometimes. I don't think there's any leaving that behind 100%. I think it'd be foolish to think that you could. But
yeah, you can't get rid of your ego, you can't get rid of your intellect. So those things will always be there to somehow interpret life and situations, but it's how you relate to the ego. It's whether you listen to the ego or not, isn't it? And it's your, you know. Sometimes, I mean, you have to have, you know, sometimes if you know, most of us have got jobs in the real world, and, you know, I've got a client at the moment, which is a crazy bitch, and my language, you know, she starts screaming, and I can just stand there, and it's just, you know, and I just sort of let it just go through me. I don't even respond to her.
Are you awake as well?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, the ego is still there, but it's not owned by anybody. And I would say also that sometimes it's absolutely absent as well, because there is just that beingness, you know. And yes, there's certain things, thoughts that come through your head, you believe some, you don't. So it's the same as before in that sense, you know. But there, you know, the ultimate truth, well, not ultimate truth, but yeah, the non-dual is separate from that, isn't it? So yeah, but yeah, that's only, it's in the background more. It's not always. I mean, it can be quite.
Depends what's going on in your life.
Oh yeah, it's pretty foreground.
What harmony you've got going on.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, certain things can have a hoop, but it doesn't really matter. In a way, that's accepted too. Like, I don't think. It depends. Yeah, it does depend. Particularly problems that are really imminent and you're facing, and you know, you say right in the moment, some stuff gets us, like it depends what your triggers are, doesn't it? So, but ultimately it comes back to it's
being able to see those triggers and if you can recognise them and not pay attention to them, then they lose their power over you and they disappear potentially.
If there's trauma there, you won't be able to ignore them. You'll just be in it. Like even if you're awake, you'll be just assumed absolutely in agony, and I think that's where it can be confusing whether you're awake or not. If you've got a certain trauma reaction, like an emotional flashback, which some people say, right, well, if you're awake, you might get emotions without content, but an emotional flashback is a flashback that doesn't have images or thoughts to it, so it can be that. And if you don't work with that, if you choose to, you might be able to navigate that. If you can't, you can do certain things about that. So there's a danger in ignoring that stuff as well. And sometimes the triggers could be external. It might be if you're in a really toxic relationship or something, you might be being triggered all the time and think, oh God, that's me. I mustn't be awake because I'm just really feeling, pissed off all the time. And then, because you're repressed and you don't realise nobody modelled fairness for you, so you don't know what fairness looks like. So there is a lot of things you can do about a lot of that psychological stuff without just, you can do the passive thing of just sitting with your feelings, but there's a lot of other stuff you can do as well. Because that was a mistake I made. Well, I didn't have any problems, so because there was no mind, I was living in shit. Like, there's this point where I was just sleeping on the floor with mice running over my feet and drinking myself to sleep and stuff. I was very, very ill and very, very sick and had no help, so I had to navigate all that as well. And some people won't be in touch with all their feelings, so meditation could be good after awakening if you're not in touch with your sadness or whatever it is that you're not looking at. It's all information, and it's good. And I find it exciting. I don't know about you after awakening, but it's the thought of bringing everything into the light is like, that's it for me. It's like, you may not care. Some people don't care and some people do. I love it because I find it exciting because it's a possibility of, like, all those gifts you had as a kid that you lay buried because nobody encouraged you, it's a possibility of actually picking those up and running with them. You might have to struggle at first, but and you can do that anyway. Anybody can do that anyway, but I think it's faster after awakening. Like, you can sometimes just see what's going on and drop something, drop a problem or an issue.
Yeah, I definitely had the feeling is like excited by the possibility that was presented with this new kind of way of taking things in, and how I would then process them and respond to them. And things that previously would have caused me a lot more stress or upset, would still tug on me, but I was viewing it from like a different place. It's more like I could see it tugging on like me, and I was watching that happen. And then over time those tugs just became less and less. But I also, just to your point about repressing feelings, would say that there was definitely kind of an unhealthy level of rationalisation or acceptance of things happening that really I needed to talk about and really I needed to express. So when things happened over those 10 years that were traumatic, in the moment I was able to take it on and accept it and all of these things, and that's great, but then it sits with you for a long time and that can be damaging. And learning that was, a reconciliation, I guess you could say, of what I'd learned with with what happens in your life, which at the beginning I wouldn't have thought. I thought I'm never going to have a problem again, and I was wrong. Yeah,
that's the problem.
Yeah. But it's all, the whole process of thinking that and then getting proved wrong. It's all the same. It's all part of the same thing.
I think there's a subtle conditioning around that. Everything's a story. Which on one level, yeah, okay, you're not this, but
yeah.
And a reluctance to look without even really thinking about it. Hold on, wait a minute. Why should I? I'm actually doing that. I'm actually. I don't know. I mean, there could be a soul for all I know. It's not what I am, but but that, then when you suddenly get permission to kind of talk about things, and I've seen it with friends as well. Like how quickly they shift. Just after awakening, whatever, just talking something through and being allowed to express everything that's in them. It's like it's a relief, and then suddenly you're moving in a different direction. It's like, it is exciting. Like, I never bothered either, and I didn't. Yeah. I think I was in denial of a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, I don't know if I would change anything going back, looking back, because being blissed out and sitting staring at trees and not giving a rat's about anything is actually just amazing.
Yeah, I think one of the things is you come to realise that you don't need to necessarily stimulate the mind or talk to anyone to feel as good as you could possibly feel. So then you think, I don't need those things anymore, or I do need them, but not really. Like I can use them for practical things maybe, but I think now I kind of think that we've evolved to have those capabilities for more reasons than just the practical things, and things like dealing with trauma and stuff. I think they're tools that are gifts as well. So
I think.
Whereas at the beginning I thought about them differently. Yeah.
I found using the mind difficult after awakening, and I didn't know that I did. So I found reading very difficult, whereas I'd always been, I read books after book after book. I've read quite a lot over my life, and so if I'd never come across that was a possibility. I think Steve Taylor writes about problems after awakening to do with the mind, and I had, which was quite useful, because I was suddenly like, that's what was going on, because reading stuff in it was just really hard, and then now it's become easier again, and I love it. I've always loved reading and stuff, so there can be, you just don't realise, maybe until someone points it out that that's what's going on, and you're, but yeah, for a long time I wouldn't have been interested either, but what I had, what I had to read, I found it a struggle, and
So there's an analogy that I kind of stumbled across, I can't remember where it was, in some sort of book, which I think kind of stayed with me for a long time, about the kind of way you could kind of sum up the difference of how I felt before and after, and that was that if you imagine you're in a boat and you're sailing along the ocean, and weather happens and waves happen, and you ride it out, and that's life, right? But when you're close to the shore, the weather affects the whole body of water. So whether or not you have a good or a bad day is just dependent on the weather. But then when you go further out to sea, the same weather happens, and you're still on the boat. The waves still come, but underneath that is a huge, still body which is so much bigger and vaster than what's just happening up there, and that kind of underpins like the surface of what's happening. Yeah, that's just kind of stuck with me, that analogy as well.
Do you find your fear of death change?
I don't think I was that scared in the first place.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm scared of dying, like in a horrible way, but I mean, I come from a secular family, and I always just kind of thought that you return to that which you were before you were born, which is, you know, not nothing, it's just the potential for something. And I was fine before I was born, so...
Oh, that's interesting.
Didn't really, like, you know, carried away, so... But dying is scary, because you can just imagine what that would do to the mind and how traumatic that would be, but actually being dead, I just feel like you're returning to the yin-yang, or whatever you want to call it, you know, just fully locked in.
So you don't believe in anything after? Oh, that's interesting though, that you have no... I've never really come across that. I mean, people are apparently often very defended against it, and they kind of in denial of fear around it, but... So you must have been... Were you quite... not massively suffering before this happened, or would you say, or...
No, it wasn't a response to trauma or anything.
Okay.
The initial bit at all.
Well,
And that was, and I remember going to my first sat saying with Max, my friend, and you know, we were 19 and everyone else was like, you know, sort of 40 to 60. And that was interesting. I don't know, just because you feel almost like people come to it for a reason.
And you were awake, sitting there?
And, well, just like something prompts them to see like another way of approaching their life, because somehow what they've got at the moment isn't quite working, or they're just curious or something like that. But in my case, I really didn't search anything out. I just met my friend Max, and he just kind of opened a door, and I was just like, you know, that was it.
How did he open the door then?
Well, he'd had a similar experience, and he just talked to me about it, and then I was like left on my own for a while, and yeah, it just unravelled, I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, you were more suffering, weren't you? I think you were more in suffering, weren't you?
In my life?
Yeah, before previous, your last life.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just immediately, yeah, I suppose.
Prior to.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it reached a point of just breaking for me. You know, a life of suffering. I guess in a graph that was doing that, but it got to its very most acute at the point before it broke and broke through. You know, it's like the storm breaking and the sun coming out. You know, but it needed that. I needed to. I look at it now and I describe it as such. I view it as such that I needed to suffer that much that I would be open to the inconceivable, or you know, I needed destruction of this. That I could just let go, just fucking let go, you know, just in the moment, can't do it, fuck it, and that, then, you know, I was in the right place at the right time, as it turned out, carrying the right amount of baggage, you know, and I had all the incentive to take the shift on board when it happened. Like you, I had no idea what I was looking for or anything, you know. I was just walking away from the pain, to be honest.
Yeah, so impossible, isn't it? That where you there's no way you can actually handle what life is throwing at you. I think a lot of people can relate to that, and a lot of people are different as well, but it does seem like that. It's, I can't, and then suddenly that's surrender, which is obviously not willed, but it seems just as if it could have been willed, but it's not. It comes upon you, but it's, it's all over.
I guess it wasn't quite at the most acute point of suffering. That was maybe a short while before.
Right.
Because it got to the point where I broke. So I kind of walked hollow, empty already, you know. I'm
right.
fucking clueless. I don't know what it is. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just gonna walk.
So conscious giving up.
Yeah. But and not, right?
Yeah.
And not actually a conscious really grabbing of the correct stick and the correct path. It was just to be able to walk into the unknown. You know, my best efforts have not created, you know, what I want. So yeah, I don't know what to do. I'll just effectively just, you know, in terms of a life and a character that I built of myself. You know, it was like I got to the point where I went, okay, I'm just going to dive off this skyscraper and see what happens, you know. Because that was the description of the society that I lived in said, you can't give up everything that you've worked your life to build, you know. But I had no choice personally, so I just dived off and thought, okay, let's see what happens.
That's the expectation. Something, right? This expectation breeds suffering.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about, right? When you said it's so difficult to transition when you're in this connected hive mind that says, you know. So I went to the other side of the world, where I was away from that instinctively.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like you talk about the unconditional things. How would you move in a conditional society with an unconditional state? Because this whole mind will bring you back to conditions in some way or another.
The mind is conditioned anyway? What do you mean? The mind is always conditioned?
It's like when you are a child, there are no conditions in it.
But there is no mind when you're, it depends what age of it.
Yeah, there is no mind. I mean, there is a blank mind, but as you grow, people put stuff in there, they get stored as memories, and you know, the more and more you collect, it develops, and then more you feed in, the more it gives you, so you get into these patterns of doing things, and that's what it is. The mind has become a pattern now. That's what I am. I'm just living by the patterns of the society.
But it still is that. I mean, it's not like there can be more room for creative thought after awakening, maybe. Or, like some people who are actually capable of critical thinking have that too. But it's still, the mind is conditioned, your ideology is conditioned, and that's probably going to come from your parents and how they treated you, a lot of that. It's quite clear in some cases. You know, we're not, unless you're not in thought, if thought is absent, there is no conditioned mind. That's the only time it's absolutely free, which is, I think, why it's so sweet when the mind is not there. And that is, it's different. It's not radically different, but it's definitely sweeter. But I can't see how the unconditioned mind is.
But that's where I think sometimes that we do need this thing to have the creation, because if you just have a singularity, nothing exists. And it's on a what spectrum of this thing I'm saying we all exist, that we benefit each other and become awakened beings. And you can exist on a really power-hungry scheme where everyone's just out there to get everyone, and you will get destroyed anyway. And if you move to the other end of just not mind, then nothing exists. So I just feel it's the two end where you just don't exist. One end is you and yourself, the other end is the peacefully nothing exists. So you have to find a balance as a society to benefit each other.
I find that quite slightly idealistic, a little bit black and, you know, because
yeah, might be. Yeah.
Well, just in the sense that I would trust someone who's authentic more than I would trust someone who's awake and not authentic, and someone who's authentic and not awake. Basically, I would trust the authentic person who's in touch with all of their emotions and much more open to the violence that's in them, you know, their own greed, hate, fear, all of that, which after awakening you can become aware of and you can before, but like, because otherwise it's just going to be people who are awake and projecting onto the other all this crap, and meanwhile there'll be people unawake thinking someone at the front of the room has got more, you know, like what they say should be listened to because it's somehow special. And
that's what I'm referring to as the power. That even if you are awake and you feel that people should listen to me, you are on a spectrum of the power, and when you are awake, you are just as it is existing. There is time.
Power in itself is not a problem. You know, that's the demonized power.
For me, the power is what everything brings in this world to us as the suffering, power, expectation. That's what I see in my head as unconditional love is where you are not bothered with the power, you are existing with everything. And that's why I was saying that if you looked at the nature, the animals, there is a power play, but they are just playing their part.
Unlike animals, I think René Girard goes into this, the human being, unlike an animal where there's a fight between whatever, and one animal and the other, whenever one is, you know, when one gives up, it offers its throat and it is not killed by the other animal. With human beings, we kill each other. We are, you know, there's a violence in us we cannot resolve. If there's a war on, we submit, we go and fight our side. We are all capable of submitting to someone. You know, there's so much, you know, we're fear-based, never mind power-based, it's the same thing. I don't think awakening is the, you know, to unconditional love includes the will to power, which we all have. If you're totally power-based, like if you're a narcissistic psychopath, well, if you're awake, you're going to be really powerful and dangerous, but more than you would be probably, but normally. I just think that there's a danger in that because we are again going to look for an ideal.
I understand what you're saying is the conscious effort is what you're referring to be in the, I don't know, right side of what you're doing. The conscious effort rather than the power maybe.
I think if you've sort of let go of your, you know, if your ego doesn't have, you know, power over you, then you've got no wish to sort of dominate other people or to be power hungry. You're just happy, you know, you can just exist.
But you have to make an effort to be there, as in effort, as in to be in that state.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Not as in.
No. I mean, that's the point. The point is that it's effortless. The point that it's effortless, and that you're not searching for anything. You know, that's the, you know, because people are, you know, that's where the suffering is in the world. People are, you know, they're either trying to move towards something, they're either desiring something, they want to get that girl, they want to get the car, they want to get the house, or they're moving away from something, they're fearing things. You know, those are the two human desires. It's fear and desire. And that constant fear and desire in people that is causing suffering. And when you're free of that, you just whatever. I don't know. You know, I don't care.
The only people that are free of fear
whatever will be.
Psychopaths. We're not free from fear. We have cortisol that rises when a tiger.
Yeah, but that's a different sort of fear. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel fear if you see a tiger. Yeah, of course.
Well, I'm using it as a metaphor. Like any change will bring fear. There will be cortisol rising. We go from parasympathetic to sympathetic nervous system all the time. You know, that's, you know.
Yeah, but then it's also, the rabid dog comes into the room, or something, or the bank robber, and everyone's fearful on the floor, and you get the one guy who doesn't feel that fear, and he just sort of stands there, and he's able to sort of disarm the robber, because he's just, he's fearless, and if you can, that's, and if you feel fearless, then you've got no reason to sort of snap at anybody, or to get angry, or to get annoyed, and, those sorts of things.
Well, you might have the perspective that, for me, fearlessness has nothing to do with non-duality. I mean, some people, there are instances, and I've heard of instances where people have woken up and had no fear. I've heard of that. But usually fear continues, so, if...
I'm not saying that fear will stop, I'm saying what I'm
it won't influence you.
I'm just saying that you're not driven. I mean, most people are driven by their fears and desires.
I would disagree with that, but that's...
I mean, you only got to see in the way people get up, they drink their coffee, they're going to work, oh yeah, I need to pay the mortgage, I need to do this, I need to do that. Looking through the magazines, the adverts, oh, I want to get that clothes, I want to get this. I mean, all those things create a kind of attachment to, what it says is that you're incomplete as you are, and that you need these things to make yourself complete. So, it's all good and well saying, yeah, I mean, look, everyone's awakened. It's whether you're able to understand it intellectually, and whether you're able to sort of, rationalise the world and take, these sort of key messages to live free in the world.
Completion has got nothing to do with the accumulation of objects or not. It really doesn't.
No, but that's what people are aiming for, because they feel incomplete.
That's an idea.
It's that feeling of incompletion.
That's something we say. We don't know that, yes, a cessation of anxiety or whatever, like, it's head stuff, yes, we do that. But again, I mean, they're all ideas, fear and desire continues, it may not have the same heat, it may not have the same adhesive quality, because you're in the moment, therefore it's unlikely you're going to work on something to the same degree unless you're really enjoying it, so you're probably it's probably going to be more organic what you do, maybe, luckily or hopefully, but everything that can be said about this, like, it's the end of this, or desire falls away, every time there's a kind of, it's not true. Like, you can't pin this down in any way. I don't think you can, and there's no, and to do so, I don't know. It's there are traits or whatever, but I don't know. I think we're driven mostly unconscious anyway. We're mostly unconscious. We don't know what drives us, and a lot of those forces I can see in retrospect, because I had repression, until 3.5 years ago when I had some of my energetic experiences, and I realised certain things. I could see that what I thought I was doing wasn't what was in fact unfolding, was completely different from what I thought. So we're really, whatever we bring into the light, there's a lot that's still in darkness. We're not like going into full consciousness. Otherwise, my God, it really would be a transformed world. And
but I'm sorry. I think that I don't think everyone has. There's a reason why not everyone has these experiences, because the world wouldn't function. If everyone was all non-dual and sort of spaced out and didn't really give a stuff, then you need the business people, and you need the people in the world to sort of drive some of this stuff to build the hospitals, to build the schools, and to do all that stuff. So, you know, I don't think...
But it's got nothing to do with not caring. I do care.
No, I'm not saying that people don't care.
Or I mean, like, or...
I'm saying it's whether you have that ambition to sort of carry these things out or not.
But that might be intrinsic to your character.
Could be.
And, you know, it doesn't stop any...
Also, yeah.
Like Gary Weber, when he woke up, no mind state, he's a businessman, like, I know he's quite scientific, but he continued to do that, you know, and just find it easier. So some people become more driven as well, like because they've never done stuff, and I've seen that. I've seen that with.
Well, well, you could just take the view, what the heck, might as well make some money, or you know, live. You know, you can. I mean, I take the view that I can enjoy material things in the world, but I can be happy with them or without them. You know, if I've got a nice car, I've got a nice car. If I haven't got a nice car, I haven't got a nice car.
With that thought, it's quite, you know, you can have that thought, but then how can you include everyone into this? Everyone wants to have it. Not everyone can have it because it's not...
No, but you have to want what you have. You know, that's the part. That's what, you know. That's what the bliss is. It's wanting what you have, and just or being completely content with what you have.
The bliss includes...
I'm not wanting anything more.
But it also includes not wanting what you have and being okay with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's outside of it.
It's losing the attachment to all these things.
There might be attachment. There might be attachment in relationships and stuff, and you might not think it's there, and then you realise it is.
No, you're right, but no, that's different from, because then you get caught up in the attachment. Whether you get caught up in the attachment or whether you're, you know, you don't.
I'm just saying. I mean, there's three sort of things to say, but to me, but it's like just not to sort of reify them and make them concrete in a way, because it's all there. Like it's, you know, the only in a no mind state I think is their absolute, you know, that total cessation of any. You know, even then you can still desire. You know what things are. You can still, I don't know. You want a coffee or a glass of wine. You can still want that without actually thinking it. You can still have desires, and I just don't think it can. Like I say, I just don't think it can be pinned down. And there's a danger in that, and it becomes stagnant in that as well, and it becomes conditioning, and it's more conditioning for the mind, and or actually, at the end of the day, none of this matters. And whether we desire something or not, we will be moving towards our way. And if you don't have desire, it could be because you're in a freeze trauma response. You're actually just not in touch with your feelings, and you're not moving towards anything.
Yeah, but whose feelings are you what feelings are you talking about? You know, I mean, that's part of it. Is if you associate, you know, if you attach yourself to your feelings, then you're ignorant. You know, that doesn't mean to say you're stupid. It means that you're taking that feeling as being your reality.
There's no one who can be attached to the feelings. There's no one who could possibly be attached to the feelings. Feeling can be there and it can be really strong, but it doesn't define you in abiding awakening anyway. It can never become who you are, because that's gone. So it's not identified with, no more than thought is. When that's fallen away, it can't come back. It's just about being in touch with the whole spectrum of your feelings, so that you can navigate reality in a way that actually is much more congruent with who you are. Otherwise, you're going to spend your life doing something with it that's actually quite not, you don't like, or isn't bringing you to life.
I kind of disagree with that.
That's okay.
So I kind of I mean I hear what you're saying, but I kind of think that the point of awakening is that you are not, you know, you're not conditioned by your feelings, you're not controlled by them, that they might come up, and you know listen, yes, of course we all have different states of mind, and we have, you know, in Hinduism there's the three gunas, which are sort of, you know, different states of being where, you know, we can feel dull, and where you can't think and you can't concentrate, and then, you know, there's rajas, where you're kind of, you know, you got this sort of desire to sort of go towards something, that sort of energy, and then you've got like the pure sort of sattva, which is like knowledge, and then in that state you're kind of, you know, you're able to sort of take everything in without any effort. You know, it doesn't take any effort to sort of, you know, to look at that clock there. You know, it doesn't take any effort. You just look at it and it's existing, and
I'm not talking about being controlled by your feelings. If you've got trauma, you probably will be. If your prefrontal cortex is on, you know, which is the front part of the brain, you will be able to think before you react. So there will be responding rather than reacting, which is very commonly experienced after awakening. But if you've got really deep trauma, the possibility of that happening is just not there. Like, you might just go into an emotional flashback, a rage attack, fear attack. You know, this is human physiology.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, you could look at it in that way, and you could also look at it, you know, there's another way of looking at it, that sort of, you know, if you believe in God, you know, if you think that these awakening experiences are, you know, divine in some respect, then you could sort of almost look at it that, you know, God will sort of give you whatever experiences you need, you know, and, you know, I mean, you know, none of us really, you know, we think we're sort of in control of our lives, but, you know, none of us know what we're going to think in 10 seconds time or 30 seconds time. You know, the thoughts and feelings just come up. So if you think about it in that capacity, that thoughts and feelings will just come up without me even having any input into them, then you can sort of dismiss them. Yeah, you don't have to then attach to them. You know, and it's, you know, so there are. For me, it's about how you sort of you can rationalise some of this stuff to, you know, you start to let go of all that baggage, that you don't have to sort of, you think, well, hold on, you know, I don't want to, you know, I didn't ask to feel like shit, I don't want to feel, I don't want to suffer because I'm not getting that girl, you know, I really want to, you know, I don't want to feel fear of something. So, yeah, if you understand that you're not really in control of the thoughts and the feelings, then you can just let go of them.
It's not about being in control, it's that you're not your thoughts and your feelings. It's not who you are. It's not about that. It's beyond control or lack of control. It's back in the opposites as well. So, you know, thoughts and feelings arise for no one. There's no one who could possibly be controlled or not controlled by them.
So I remember my mum once said to me, well, if you're going to be happy forever, why don't you just go and stare at the wall? You know, just don't do anything with your life.
So we said that again.
My mum once said to me, like, when we were talking about it, she said, well, if everything's as good as anything else, why don't you just go and sit at the wall, stare at the wall for 10 years?
Yeah. That's how I feel when my mother-in-law comes round. I feel like locking myself in the dark, you know, for 3 hours until she leaves.
I think, from one perspective, I obviously completely understood what she meant, is that if, you know, if judgment arises and you don't pay attention to it, then everything's kind of
it's all the
good
same.
or as bad.
It's all the same, exactly.
But alongside that, there's, you know, the step forward from that, which also happens, which is that you act on those judgments as well, and you know, like I've got 2 businesses, right? And you know, it hasn't kind of stopped me from doing anything, I don't think. I mean, maybe for the first little while, because I just was so absorbed with the immediacy of what was going on. But then, over time, in my experience anyway, it's kind of accepting that life goes on and that, you know, your desires as you put them to like achieve and all of this stuff is just, you know, it's not necessarily like an evil thing. It's not. It's just
it's not
a thing that you can act on at the time or you don't, and you observe whether you do or you don't, and you go along. And you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also in business. I know what it's like because you've got practical stuff to deal with in the world.
Yeah. But from one perspective, it does seem trivial, and that's kind of difficult in a
you
way.
get caught up in the whole drama of it. And,
but in another way, it's as brilliant a thing to happen as sitting in your room, being able to go out and do that.
Do you stare at your wall?
No, but you know, it's kind of like me washing the dishes can be like a kind of almost spiritual experience from one perspective. Even though I could just sit and think, oh, doesn't matter if they get dirty, doesn't matter if I don't do it, you know. It's like the act of living is itself like, you know, an amazing thing. And
yeah, it's just to be without any doing.
No, but with the doing as well.
You can
doing
do or
is
you can
an
not
amazing
do,
thing
but
as well.
just to be is all you need.
Yeah, it's kind of self-sufficient at all times.
They merge, being and doing merge, but being it can be felt more deep sometimes in being, but they merge, they're the same thing.
I mean, if you take yourself to be the doer, you know, if you take yourself to be the doer, then you're going to sort of, you know, then you're going to suffer, but then you're going to feel the pain or loss of what you're doing. You know, if you succeed or if you fail, then if you take yourself to be the doer, then you will, you know, you'll enjoy and suffer. You have the highs when things go well, and you'll have the lows. But if you don't take yourself to be the doer, then all of that pain and, you know, then you're not bothered either way. And you know, I'm a design creative, and I do my best work when I'm not bothered about the outcome, one way or the other. You know.
What about the rest of you? Haven't spoken.
Yeah.
You guys. Any questions?
I think their conversation with just now. I was listening to somebody, and it was was some conversation going on. And it was said that this doesn't need to be what it is. There's no need in this. And that kind of hit me in the sense that this doesn't have any need in it. And then I went to the park, and I was sitting and looking at trees and stuff. And suddenly, contemplating on what was going on, and the branches the one branch was everything in a sense, but it turned into something nice.
Okay.
But just now when you were talking about trauma and everything, I was wondering why it is gone. Why, like you might say, why we can't taste the chocolate again?
Why, what, sorry?
Why can't we taste the chocolate again, like we were talking about, the trauma?
Yeah.
And that was the trauma that I couldn't see that again, it is gone. But now I kind of realize that the trauma was also that beauty.
Okay.
Because the person wants that thing to be same again, or it to be different. But as long as there is a person who wants this to be different, so that it becomes trauma.
Yeah.
But that it's seen through. The trauma is also the.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, was it like a glimpse for you then, or?
Yeah, kind of a glimpse, yeah, but I just know why it's like resonance again, that to want it to see it, want it to be, as long as it's personal, you want it to be different.
Yeah.
But at that moment, it's not personal.
Mm-hmm.
So trauma is that it's not personal once it's seen. It's not.
Yeah.
So it's trauma is also what's happening as beauty, rather than like washing the dishes or whatever you're doing any moment.
When did that happen for you then?
Last week I was listening to Andrew Muller in the morning, and
Okay.
there was a conversation that was kind of heard.
Ah, right, okay, it just resonated.
Yeah. But sometimes something resonates, something really strong. And, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Are you frustrated now, or is it, you don't sound it like?
No, like conversation I was listening to is kind of resonated that
Oh, okay.
this is already it doesn't need to be different in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then the person comes back and says, where is that, or how the world should run, how I should make pay bills and everything like that. But it kind of makes sense that this is not personal, it's not. You do pay bills and you do suffer, you do, but it's not attached to you anymore.
Yeah, nice way of putting it. That's nice.
So it doesn't need to be different.
No.
Yeah.
Only sometimes that's okay too.
Yeah.
Even when it does need to be different,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Can I ask you something?
Oh no.
What has motivated you to sort of hold this talk, or to sort of speak about your experience or your own sort of insights? What's your motivation?
I guess it's something I thought would be sort of able to do. Like I wanted to see if I could articulate. I mean, these are just all ideas. I don't know really why, but obviously I could say it's just happening. But there's definitely, you know, it's interesting to, you know, like it's. I thought it would be really difficult to do, and I didn't like the first time I did it. But it's not.
When did you first start doing it?
It'll be a year ago now. Yeah. So it's interesting because you start to know what you think. Because you're talking about it. I mean, also in conversation too. But you start to. It clarifies your thinking, especially the questions, because it brings in creativity. So it's quite interesting what you were saying. You just sort of. It's that. It really grounds it as well. It just makes you. It's just interesting from a kind of mind perspective as well. But also there's something about talking about it, not all the time, like it can get very heady as well, but sometimes you can really drop in this, and also there's a sense of the community, the people who are interested in this, I feel is very, very lovely and very open. Somehow it feels like it's not a moral space, it's not a judgmental space in the same way, like it's okay to just let someone be, you know, if they're different or strange or whatever. It can kind of, there's a freedom in these meetings. I've always felt in other people's meetings, and like because I've got not really any agenda, you know, in a way. It's just talking about stuff that I care about, like, and I'm interested in other people's experiences as well, because I just find it, particularly in person, like, it makes much of a difference, but, and in the audiences as well, because there's hardly any seekers left in the audience. So the awake people in the audiences is kind of funny. And yeah, why do you ask? Are you just curious?
Well, I'm just curious to know, because obviously, you know, the motivation behind your talk is an important part of why you're here. I would assume. You know, I've got a couple of friends who I sometimes talk to about this stuff, and I've got one friend who's sort of suffering with all sorts of mental anguish, and I've sort of tried to talk to him, just to sort of maybe give him a different view on his suffering, just to sort of alleviate that suffering. So I'm just, you know, I'm not saying I'm anything special in doing that, I'm just saying that's my motivation for talking to him and trying to maybe get him to sort of think slightly differently and maybe say, yeah, I don't need to really, you know, attach to that suffering the whole time, I can kind of let it go. So I guess, you know, the fact that you're here sitting in front of us, my question is why, yeah, it's just, you know, I mean, there are other people who teach and they have, you know, are different motivations, and they just want to sort of, you know, pass some of this knowledge on, and trying to get people to sort of think and maybe, I mean, it's all about alleviating your suffering, really, in the world. You know, that's really the point of it.
That's what I think. Maybe if I'd talked about this 10 years ago, I really wouldn't have had anything to say except this is it, blah blah blah. But I think for me, maybe the only interesting thing is to realise that repression could still go on, and how if I'd known now what I've known then what I know now, how life would have been different. And I wish I kind of had, you know, not been so conditioned to kind of not look at things in my life and not realise actually psychological stuff can still continue. I didn't realise that, and so it's almost like, well, for me, if there's any benefit, like, I'm not here to kind of help alleviate people's suffering, not really, you know, but it's more like, well, permission to look at that, permission to explore that aspect afterwards as well, because, you know, I think a lot of people remain stuck in you know, rather than bringing their life into alignment with their now changed inner state, they remain stuck in situations that do not reflect who they are anymore. Like, and I think that's quite sad. It might be okay, you know, it's all right, but it's nice when some people do recognise and they shift, and it's like, you know, but really, you know, if that's sort of anything I've got to impart, I'd like to talk about, I suppose, because I don't know, the message itself is so simple, there really isn't much to say about it, is there? I mean, so, this is it, and you're all already realised, but it's, you know, everything and nothing, you know.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is this famous phrase, isn't it? Most of us are driving by looking in the rear view mirror and keep crashing. So a lot of us are just living on the memories of the past and planning the future, and that's where we keep not moving forward. I think once you realise that the memory is just a memory, you can't go correct anything, you can't do anything. think even the trauma will sort of start falling away once you realise it. But it's quite a hard thing to give up that thing.
I think after awakening, the problem can be that the memory is totally disregarded or not looked at. It can be the opposite problem, so that the trauma remains. Trauma doesn't, it might fall away. I haven't heard of that. It might, but it's unlikely to, because trauma doesn't age. It's stored in the amygdala. It does not age with time. So it's fresh. So it's in the body. It's not, it cannot just fall away. Like it, I mean, maybe it could, I'm not saying.
Isn't that the memory though?
Memory, it's not stored in memory. Trauma's not in memory. It's, if it was, we would heal. You know, you just naturally heal from it. It's not, it's timeless. It's an eternal screen, you know. It's, you get flashbacks from it, whether just emotions or because it's stuff that's forgotten or buried, because it's overwhelming. It was overwhelming when we were kids, you know. So
you say it's more kind of cellular memory than cognitive.
yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't shift at all, even when you do, you know, it can be really hard to shift, as you know. But at least to identify it, it can give you some sanity over it, because, you know, if maybe you're awake and you're in a freeze state and you're isolating and you don't even know you're doing it, or, you know, like a lot of people, they can confuse one state with another. You could be bliss, you could be dissociated, you can be awake and dissociate, you know, there's always, you know, until you really get to know yourself, or, you know, or educate yourself and reading and stuff, you can, you know, I don't know, I think it really frees you up to change things. Not that anyone could do that, but an intelligent being will move towards, you know, if you're growth orientated, which you probably will be after awakening, you'll move towards what you know, what's good for you, with the right, you know, well, whatever. Actually, you can't say anything new.
Awakening is only the beginning.
And the end, yeah. But I think, because that whole thing of deepening doesn't make sense to me, but certainly the psyche can come more into the light and change.
Yeah.
Because you might as well live your life to the fullest. You might as well have a good, rich, full life and actualize as much as you can. It's good, it's exciting, that's good stuff. But again, everybody has a possibility of that, but I think you've got a head start if you're awake, because it's just a little bit, might be a little bit easier depending on what's there. But something about the end. It's like very near the end. It's, anybody last comments? The quiet person with that? No. You're alright to sit there.
I'm just observing.
Oh, you just, right, okay.
I'm just listening.
Okay. Afterwards, if there's a few of us, we can go to the pub if you want to come along. And a glass of very desirable wine or orange juice or whatever. You take your trauma for a drink. Is there any last comments?
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm interested by the fact that everyone here is male. I wasn't expecting that.
That's why it's so heady, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe, yeah. Maybe, yeah.
It's very intellectual.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, I heard a few female voices out there. I was like, please come in. Yeah, we need you.
To get the women in, yeah, we need a few more.
And I wonder what the reason for that is. Well, you know,
I'm very heady.
There might not be one.
I think maybe, I don't know.
That's crossed my mind to me.
I think a lot of them are probably already awakened.
Yeah.
It's very unusual, isn't it? It hasn't happened before.
Maybe it's because of you, because you're really heady as well.
The cameraman is also heady.
You always get men. Like
But
The silence is
Yeah.
very
But it hasn't happened here before, has it, with you?
No, you one or two. It's predominantly men, but I don't know. Maybe the women haven't come back so much, but I don't know. It's probably because men come to see you, and
Yeah.
I think it's your fault.
Maybe it's because men used to meet up website more. Because the times I've gone to meet before, it's been mainly women. So it's interesting, and there might be one explanation.
Alright. That was very fiery, wasn't it? I noticed that a lot. Actually, I quite enjoy that because I am like.